Hello and welcome to our Eduro Learning video series, Let's Get Connected. In this series, we will hear from 10 connected teachers from all around the world as they share their top tips for getting connected, ways to connect your classroom and your students, to advice for ways to bring parents on board with a connected classroom, and so much more. My name is Chrissy Hellier and I'll be your host throughout this series. I've been a connected teacher with a connected classroom for over 10 years now, and I can't wait to introduce you to some of the connected educators that I've had the privilege of getting connected to and working on global collaboration projects with. Today, our amazing connected teachers are going to talk with us about getting started in a connected classroom. Some of them are going to tell you some stories about how they personally got started, and some are going to tell you some ways that you yourself can get started. Enjoy the conversation.
I stumbled upon Coattail, and the Coattail push was a huge one. And that kind of allowed me, it was daunting and a little bit nervous about starting that, but it was a huge, practical, adventurous, and bold move that I took. And that was kind of the beginning of it all. And then this idea of being a connected educator, like I was saying before, it kind of pushed me to lead it at school, on my own school. It was really interesting how I can kind of lead myself backwards to see the progression of that Learning 2.0 being the genesis of this connection that I started to make, but then Coattail being the place where I sort of solidified those connections and interest in being a connected educator, and how those are now kind of sprouting into different directions, which I think is it's pretty cool. And I'm really so happy that I was lucky enough to have the chance to go there and experience that. So even within the last couple of years, I've had the chance to kind of join in with the NISA collaborative. Our school is part of the NISA region, the Near East South Asia. And we now have a NISA Fine and Performing Arts Collaborative, which I'm currently the head of, which is fantastic. It's kind of a new opportunity for discipline-specific people to get connected, and I'm really enjoying my role in that position now.
So, I would recommend becoming a connected educator by starting small, really like picking one network. So maybe it's Twitter or Instagram or Slack, whatever it is, some group that you're curious about, and that, you can relate to, the topics that are really key to that network. And then, for example, one network that I am really close with is the Design Thinking in K-12 community. And they have a powerful hashtag DTK12chat on Twitter. And so I can follow that group and that thread and then kind of learn from that community, right? And get to know the people who are there. And as you become more comfortable, you can start chiming in with your own thoughts and questions, but I think you can allow yourself time to do that, to understand how a network's working, how people engage in that network, and then start to jump in. And then over time, reach out and say, hey, can I get to know you? Or maybe can I co-lead a chat with you? But just starting small and growing that communications over time.
So getting started as a connected educator is really about trying to connect into communities that are outside the ones that you physically work with every day. For me, I started with using mailing lists. Many years ago, I discovered some mailing lists, and it was fantastic. You could get onto those communities and post questions, and people would give you answers. And I just found my teaching world expanded dramatically as soon as I got onto those those early days of lists and listservs and everything else. And since then, of course, we've gone through revolutions of blogging, where the teachers have been sharing ideas and reading each other's blogs and leaving comments and engaging in conversation and dialogue. And then, of course, Twitter came along, and there's been wave after wave of technologies that let teachers pretty easily connect. And so my advice on getting started with any of those is pick whatever it happens to be, whatever it could be. Meetup, it could be Facebook, it could be Twitter, it could be blogs, could be anything. But just find some sort of community and connect with that.
Well, this goes way back when I started teaching internationally, actually, at ISB in Thailand. And honestly, I still remember the day I was hired. I was interviewed by the principal, Annalise, on Skype. I had never even heard of Skype. I didn't know what it was. It was a whole new world. So that was just sort of a little introduction to the technology use through the hiring process, let alone what happens at the school. In the classroom, that's when I was introduced to blogging. So that was 2008. So I've been blogging for about, 11 or so years, consistently every year. I have never had a year off or anything like that. The blog has evolved. It's changed over the years. I've become obviously stronger at blogging. I still have a lot to learn. But to get started as an educator, you need to be open, first of all, and be willing to take risks. I mean, yeah, I was a little bit out of my comfort zone, but you have to jump in feet first and trust in the people around you to help you and support you. So you need to be open to new possibilities. And it's really rethinking the way that you think, how you're going to be using technology in the classroom. If you're going to be using tech, to create something in your classroom, what are you going to do with it? Is it going to stick, into the hard drive and stay there? Or are you going to open up those walls like I talked about before and share it with the community, share it with people around the world, and show others what you're doing in your classroom?
So how would I get started being a connected educator? I look back to when I first did this, which was again to do with IB and ITGS. I set up a group between Madeline Brooks, Julie Lindsay, and at that time, the head of IT at Vienna International School, Barbara Stefanics, and the four of us worked together on the ITGS projects. And since then, I've become involved in a variety of online projects from there, to the extent that I've actually started to start some myself. I would keep coming back to Flat Connections and the amazing work that Julie Lindsay does as an entry point, whether you're down in kindergarten, year 1, year 2, or right up into the senior school where a lot of my students are. When we're talking about the connections projects, this is the best place to start. She's got the framework in place for you. You go bang, walk in, incredibly cheap rate for the kids, and an incredible experience.
Thing is, like, you need to connect yourself, because you can't have a connected classroom unless you have connected yourself. So the first thing is just finding the tool that works for you. For myself, that happens to be Twitter and Instagram, but there's so many other tools out there that just like play around, figure out what works for you, and then find people to follow. And so that's one of those ones that I usually start off with, like just searching education, like what sorts of things are out there, or my grade level that I'm at. And then there's also like great things where there's like follow loops on Instagram where you can find a whole bunch of new people to start following that are all educators, or ed chats or Twitter challenges, which just gives you a whole host of people to find and interact with. And then just start creating content, dive in. I was one of those ones that I didn't always feel like I could create content. I wanted it to be perfect, but it's one of those ones, don't worry about it being perfect and just dive right in and start producing. And then the other big thing with like making it work or getting started is just set time aside every day that you can connect, or at least like a couple times a week. Because once you have that time set in stone, you know, like, oh, I can actually connect, and it's not another thing to do. It's like, I already do that. And so those are some ways that you can get started with connecting yourself.
I got started being a connected educator by wanting to find out more of what other people were doing. I heard of this thing called Twitter. That would have been about, well, maybe 8 or 9 years ago, I guess. And I just started getting on Twitter. That was the very first time I'd ever thought I'd even connect with somebody. And at first I didn't really know what I was doing. I just got on Twitter and started following people. And I think at first I started following like 1,000 people, and no one was following me back, and I wasn't really doing anything either. And at first I thought this was a big waste of time. Then after a while, I started to make some connections, very small, maybe 1 or 2. And then these people had blogs. So that introduced me to blogs. I started reading blogs, and then I ended up creating my own blog. And that's kind of how the ball got rolling.
If I were just getting started right now in being a connected educator, I would say the first thing I would do is get on Twitter. And what I did that I feel is very valuable is I customized my Twitter account to only be librarians and tech people. So it was really, every time something comes in, automatically I'm kind of filtering out what somebody's eating for breakfast or something like that, and really getting down to the heart of what I know is going to make me a better teacher.
I think it went back, I'm probably going to go back to maybe 2005, and I'd been hearing about this blogging thing, didn't really know anything about it, and I must have read an article or something, and so I went, I know what it was. Ian Jukes, who's out of Canada, had spoken at a conference here in my state, and one of the things he shared was the URL to his blog. And so I went there, and he had just shared a blog from David Warlick, who has retired recently, but is also a big blogger. And I went and read that. Well, then that's when I learned, people left comments, and I read some of those. And some of them, left links. And so I started going and looking at their blogs, and I could drop names. Good friend here, Jeff Utek, was on there, and Will Richardson, and a number of people. And so. And then, wow, they really write great stuff. And and some of it would fire you up, and you'd leave a comment and whatever. And then I ended up going to a conference here in the US and saw a lot of these people. And while at that conference, Twitter was brand new, and you couldn't just go sign up. You had to have an invite. And I think it was John Pedersen, who's up in Wisconsin. He was handing out invites. I think he had 50 of them or something, and I got one. And so then everybody there in the Bloggers Cafe at the conference started following each other, and that's how I got going there. And then I started my own blog, and I actually had started it a little bit before that, and shared out some great stuff that was happening in my classroom, and some of that people knew about when I was at the conference, which surprised the heck out of me. And they wanted to talk to me about it, and then it just kind of went from there.
So I got started in, I think, a very unusual way. I was in a conference, and Alan November, who is a connected educator and connected person, was running a workshop. And I went into this workshop, and he's very abrupt, and he says, you must be doing this. You have to do this. If you're not doing this, get out of teaching. And I didn't know most of what he was talking about. He talked about Twitter. I didn't know about Twitter. He talked about wiki spaces and how they can be edited. I didn't know what wiki spaces was. He talked about Skype. He talked about blogging. I didn't know what any of this was, but I took frantic notes. Everyone else walked out of that workshop saying, he was awful. He was awful. And I walked out of there saying, I have to find out everything he's talking about. And that very day, I started a blog. I got my students blogging the very next day. They were thrilled. And I started Skyping right away, and then ended up joining the EdTech Talk community, which I had never heard of before. And I started recording shows that I had never heard of before. And I met people like Chrissy Hellier through these things I had never had any knowledge of. And it was just wonderful. And it started me, that was in 2007. It started me on this road.
I hope you enjoyed hearing those ways that our connected teachers got started and some of their ideas for how you can get started as much as I did. My advice, my best piece of advice for getting started is to just jump in there with 2 feet, take a risk and do it. Get yourself on Twitter if you're not already there, and start following these amazing 9 educators that are featured in this series. They will give you an awesome start on the road to being a connected teacher. If you like this format, hearing from lots of different perspectives on a single topic, then please click on that like button below. Subscribe to our channel to get all of the videos in this series. Turn on the notifications to find out when we're live on YouTube, and be the first to see the next installment in the Let's Get Connected series. Do you have any questions about having a connected classroom or being a connected teacher? Or would you like to see a specific series related to anything about education and technology? leave us a comment below and let us know. If you'd like to see even more resources to help you in the classroom after you've watched this series, then head on over to our website and check out all of our free resources. We have more videos, blog posts, some online courses all about teaching and learning and coaching in the digital world.